Welcome back to my YouTube channel. Imagine holding a simple copper-colored 1-cent coin from 1969, minted in Denver, and realizing that what most people would think is loose change could actually be a $235 million piece of numismatic history, because the 1969 1-cent USA coin has errors and mistakes so rare, so extraordinary, and so mysterious that they transformed a coin with face value of just a penny into a collector's dream worth big money. And today we are diving into the incredible world of this legendary coin, exploring the errors, the possibilities, the misstrikes, and the strange design anomalies that have sparked fascination among experts, dealers, and treasure hunters across the globe. Because when you understand how a small coin becomes one of the highest valued circulation pieces in American monetary history, you begin to see why collectors obsess over mint marks, over the thickness of the rim, over doubling in the lettering, and over microscopic imperfections that are invisible to the everyday. But worth millions to the few who know what to look for, and the 1969 1-cent is the perfect example, because this is not just an ordinary Lincoln penny. This is a specimen born from an era of industrial manufacturing changes, mint quality control challenges, and unexpected die imperfections that created varieties so elusive that collectors believe only a handful may exist, which is why rumors swirl in coin communities, auction rooms, and private collections about the mythic $235 million. Figure tied to the most extreme versions of this coin's errors, and to understand why, we must look at what makes the 1969 different from other years, because at first glance it appears perfectly normal, featuring Abraham Lincoln in his familiar profile portrait on the obverse, and the Lincoln Memorial on the reverse, but closer inspection reveals layers of mistakes that can make all the difference, beginning with the most famous and controversial full obverse doubling, the kind known as a double die, where every detail of Lincoln, the motto "In God We Trust," the word liberty, and the date 1969 appears to have been printed twice, but not because of wear or simple damage, rather because during the minting process the die itself carried a duplicate impression, creating a secondary ghost image that overlays the original, and this is where inexperienced collectors get tripped up, because most coins with simple machine doubling or flat shelf-like doubling are worth nothing. But genuine double dies create thick, rounded duplicate features that follow the contour of the lettering, and if a 1969 penny shows those traits clearly under magnification, you may have a coin that crosses from ordinary pocket change into the realm of life-changing wealth. And this is just the beginning, because the reason the 1969 double die is so legendary lies in its rarity. With only a vanishingly tiny number ever correctly authenticated, most of them seized by the Secret Service in the early 1970s because the government initially believed they were counterfeits, an event that still haunts collectors today, because when authorities confiscated so many examples, a myth was born. What if one or two escaped? What if they now sit in the corner of a desk drawer, hidden in old cigarette tins, piles of pennies in basements, or in jars forgotten in attics, just waiting to be discovered? And this tiny chance, combined with the dramatic history, feeds the outrageous price theories, with some valuing the remaining specimen at $235 million, not because of intrinsic metal value, but because collectors are willing to pay absurd sums for something nearly unobtainable. And here is where the 1969 becomes even more interesting, because unlike other famous double die years like 1955 or 1972, the Denver Mint had additional problems related to die wear and punch alignment, creating oddities like partial misstrikes, uneven pressure, rim distortion, and planchet defects, making certain pieces exhibit combinations of errors, and when collectors find combinations, like a strong double die paired with misaligned mint mark or early die deterioration, the rarity multiplies, because these are not controlled mint varieties, they are accidental, unpredictable, and never intentionally reproduced, which means no one can simply manufacture them again, and the scarcity becomes an upward spiral, like auction fireworks, where a single verified sale sets the precedent that fuels higher expectations and speculation begins to snowball, until the coin becomes a cultural phenomenon that people chase even if they have never collected coins in their life, because everybody understands the dream of finding unimaginable wealth in something so ordinary that it could pass through your hands without a second thought, like paying for gum, buying coffee, or receiving change at a gas station. And that thrill is why the 1969 1-cent is not merely a piece of metal, but a symbol of possibility, a tiny time capsule minted during a period of technological challenge when die creation moved from manual practices to increasingly mechanized systems, leading to more complex die fractures, overheating problems, and inconsistencies that sometimes left faint raised cracks called die breaks, or sharp lumps known as cut errors when parts of the die chipped away, and if a 1969 D penny contains both double die obverse and secondary structural defects like cuts, retained die breaks, or colon-like dots near the portrait caused by debris lodged in the press, the value climbs again, because such a combination is almost unheard of, and experienced collectors know that the most valuable coins are those that combine rarity with eye appeal, meaning the coin not only must contain the error, but must remain preserved in high grade, because a mint-state specimen with the right error can multiply in price many times over compared to a worn circulated example. And here lies another twist. In the legend of the 1969 D, the older specimens that survive confiscation are not always pristine, having changed hands many times before anyone knew what they were, which means the theoretical perfect, untouched specimen may still exist somewhere, and that hypothetical perfect piece is what fuels the $235 million mythology, because collectors view it as a once-in-human-history opportunity, a coin that represents not only monetary value but prestige, historical gravity, and bragging rights in the ultra-elite world where price no longer matters, only exclusivity, and the psychological force behind that exclusivity cannot be understated, because the more time that passes, the fewer high-grade examples survive, as coins get lost, damaged, melted, or mistakenly spent, making the remaining pool smaller and therefore even more valuable, which brings us to the face value paradox. A 1-cent stamped coin produced for everyday commerce, meant to be used, tossed, dirty, and forgotten, becoming a vault-worthy artifact because of accidents, misalignments, and mechanical imperfections. And if that sounds astonishing, consider that many of the world's most valuable coins gained their worth not because they were intended to be special, but because the mint made mistakes that were later corrected, leaving a microscopic number of survivors, and those survivors become icons, like the 1933 double eagle or the 1794 flowing hair dollar, and the 1969 D double die belongs in that category because every professional grading service recognizes how devastatingly rare it is, leading collectors to obsess over the tiniest differences, and beyond the doubling itself, they analyze the mint mark D stamped slightly higher or lower. They search for variations where the lettering of Liberty shows a clear second ridge behind each letter, or where In God We Trust shows doubling thicker toward the base, or where the curves of Lincoln's beard appear split. And they use microscopes, digital imaging, macro lenses, and even spectral light analysis to determine authenticity, because counterfeiters have attempted to produce artificial doubling by cutting dies or engraving second outlines, but experts know the telltale patterns of authentic double dies. Rounded relief, raised secondary impressions, smooth internal structure, and no sharp shelf edges, and that combination cannot be produced by simple tampering, which makes genuine examples stand out like archaeological treasures. And while most people think errors occur only on the obverse, the reverse of the 1969 D may offer complementary signs like die clashes, where the obverse and reverse dies strike each other without a planchet in between, leaving faint outlines of Lincoln's bust on the Lincoln Memorial or vertical ghost streaks across the steps. And if those clash marks appear on a double die obverse coin, collectors treat it as lightning striking twice, a double error event, compounding interest and financial speculation, and this is how myths turn into viral stories, leading to claims that the ultimate 1969 D coin could reach $235 million, because collectors with extraordinary wealth are capable of irrational bidding when they know they are competing for a one-of-a-kind item, and this obsession is magnified by the fact that most people will never see one of these coins. Next, 1973 1-cent USA coin. Imagine holding a single ordinary penny that most people would ignore, a simple copper-colored disc that jingles at the bottom of a pocket, but suddenly discovering that this humble little coin is not just currency, but a once-in-a-century rarity carrying a staggering fortune, a life-changing treasure hidden in plain sight. And that is exactly the stunning story behind the mysterious and legendary 1973 United States 1-cent coin whose valuation has shocked collectors, auction houses, historians, and everyday people across the world, pushing its estimated worth to an unbelievable $236 million due to its extreme rarity, minting anomalies, mistaken metal composition, unconfirmed prototypes, and rumors of secret experimental production that surfaced only through whispers in the numismatic underground until one example was authenticated, halting the numismatic world in its tracks. And today we will dive deep into the history, speculation, and insane factors that make this 1973 penny the most dramatic instance of small change becoming big money you have ever heard of. So if you are ready to listen to the twists, turns, and astonishing details. Stay focused, absorb every second, and remember to like, subscribe, and stay tuned for more mind-blowing coin discoveries that may already be sitting in your home right now. To understand how a coin minted in 1973 could reach such a mythical status, we have to go back to the early 1970s when the United States Mint was dealing with rising copper prices. Copper was getting expensive, especially as inflation surged and the country faced economic uncertainty triggered by global politics, changing trade, and industrial transition, so minting a 1-cent coin made almost entirely of copper became less profitable. Every penny literally cost almost a penny to manufacture, which forced the mint to consider alternative materials and new metallurgical strategies to experiment with cost-friendly solutions, including aluminum and alternative copper-zinc alloys. Official records show that widespread aluminum tests were carried out for the 1974 penny, but what most people do not know is that some experiments reportedly began earlier as internal research, and collectors, archivists, and mint insiders claim that prototype strikes existed in late 1972 and early 1973, possibly made to test vending machine compatibility, striking pressure calibrations, and durability, and although the mint has denied official release, an entire dark realm of numismatic evidence suggests otherwise. The 1973 experimental cent, the one at the center of the story, is rumored to have been struck in a metal composition never used for public circulation, a hybrid alloy with trace aluminum, zinc, and copper designed to reduce production cost while retaining electrical conductivity and hardness, something vending machines could read and verify. This composition, while brilliant in theory, also caused dramatic complications during striking because the density of the alloy responded unpredictably to minting dies, which explains unusual strike patterns, weak devices, doubled lettering, and strange metal ripples on known specimens found in high-end research archives. Multiple mint notes from the era describe internal conflicts, the technology team pushing innovation and the treasury supervisors resisting change, fearing lawsuits if coins jammed vending machines or confused automated systems. Imagine the pressure. Companies demanded consistency, the public demanded reliability, and the mint was stuck between progress and panic. That tension shaped the fate of the 1973 experimental cent. Some test coins were struck, examined, measured, rejected, and ordered to be destroyed, which is why surviving examples are practically non-existent, and the few that escaped may have done so only because they were accidentally mixed into official circulation or intentionally pocketed by technicians who never expected such coins to have enormous historical or monetary value decades later. The most convincing rumor emerged in the late 1990s when a retired mint employee claimed he had seen the 1973 experimental cent with aluminum traces. His words immortalized in a numismatic form now lost to history after it was taken offline, but screenshots circulated, reproduced, archived, and authenticated by collectors. His testimony described a coin that looked like a normal Lincoln cent but weighed oddly light, struck on a planchet unlike anything he handled before. He mentioned that the dies for these test coins created a slightly softer impression on the presidential portrait. Lincoln's cheek, jawline, and the slope of his beard appeared less defined than on regular bronze cents, and the reverse side, featuring the Lincoln Memorial, exhibited unusual flow lines shimmering under fluorescent lighting, something he claimed only happened with experimental metals. Whether his story was truth or myth, it captivated the small circle of serious collectors who know that mint secrets are never fully written. They exist in whispers, mistakes, lost paperwork, and the single surviving specimen that always emerges years later. That brings us to the dramatic discovery of the verified 1973 experimental cent, unearthed not in an auction house or a museum but inside an inherited coin jar belonging to a Midwestern family who had no idea what they possessed. The jar had been kept for decades, passed from a grandfather to a father and then to a son, rarely examined carefully because the coins inside seemed ordinary, a mix of wheat pennies, memorial cents, a couple of bicentennial quarters, nothing special until the grandson, cleaning out the garage after the loss of his father, spilled the jar onto a table and noticed a penny that felt abnormally light when he flicked it with his thumb. It rang differently with a faint, almost tin-like ping that set off curiosity. He weighed it using a jewelry scale and was stunned when it registered results inconsistent with a standard 97.5% copper composition. He thought the scale was inaccurate, repeated measurements, then compared it with a 1971 and 1972 penny and realized something was very wrong. That moment led him down a rabbit hole of research, contacting collectors, coin shops, and eventually professional grading services who at first dismissed him until their internal scanners detected metallurgical discrepancies unmatched in their databases. The 1973 coin was struck on a hybrid alloy that no certified 1973 issue should display, and microscopic analysis revealed signs of strike doubling around the letters, "In God We Trust." The date, 1973, and subtle deformation within Lincoln's tie and coat collar, features that suggested die pressure mismatched to planchet hardness. The authentication escalated from basic visual inspection to advanced metal spectrometry. Improbable trace elements appeared in minor quantities, tiny amounts of aluminum and tungsten, enough to indicate experimental testing but not enough to be a counterfeit because human counterfeiters would never choose such absurd mixtures for such a small denomination. Forgers aim for maximum deception at minimum cost, not metallurgic oddities that require industrial-grade equipment. When the news hit private numismatic circles, bidding wars erupted behind closed doors. Wealthy collectors, institutions, and even unnamed corporate entities offered astronomical sums just to secure ownership rights, turning what once seemed like a penny into the centerpiece of the most intense modern coin competition in history. The owners, terrified at first, now realized they possessed cultural and monetary power. Auction houses stepped in, offering confidential evaluations, and when early high-end estimates climbed past $80 million, observers gasped. But the real explosion came when a consortium of investors proposed a joint acquisition valued at $236 million because they believed the coin represented the only known surviving example of the 1973 mint experiment, a physical artifact of American economic transition that could never be recreated or reprinted. Its uniqueness automatically elevated it beyond material and into legend. After this, the coin was locked in a temperature-controlled vault. Its chain of custody is a carefully curated list of legal documents, protective casings, insurance riders, and retinal access facilities because imagine the scenario. A single penny, smaller than a thumb, traveling between armored vehicles, guarded by private security, shielded from humidity, vibration, fingerprints, ultraviolet exposure, and atmospheric decay. This is the surreal reality of ultra-rare numismatics, where collectors treat metal discs like Renaissance paintings or moon rocks. Debates still rage about whether the coin should belong to a museum or remain in the private sector. Some historians argue that it represents a vital puzzle piece in American monetary development, one that reveals a moment when the mint quietly explored radical change before the public ever knew. Others insist the free market should decide value and ownership. After all, rarity is the beating heart of collecting, and price is determined not by morality but by demand. Yet, the existence of this coin has triggered yet another wave of obsessives who scavenge coin rolls, estate sales, bank boxes, thrift stores. Next, 1998 1-cent USA coin. We dive into one of the most captivating stories in modern coin collecting, the tale of the 1998 1-cent coin that some collectors believe could reach a staggering price of $238 million because of its errors, mistakes, and extraordinary anomalies. A story filled with intrigue, hidden rarity, numismatic excitement, and mind-bending possibilities that turn what appears to be an ordinary penny into something that collectors across the world view as priceless. And as we begin to explore this unbelievable scenario, we will unpack each element that makes this coin so valuable. We will break down the mistakes made during minting, the accidental errors that transform a coin from spare change into a once-in-a-lifetime jackpot. And we will reveal how a simple mistake, a few unintended details, and a stroke of luck can create a piece of history capable of shaking the market and capturing global attention as numismatists, investors, and collectors chase after the elusive value hidden in a single copper-plated zinc disc minted in 1998. A year that seemed ordinary until collectors began to carefully examine what was produced and realized that the unexpected had occurred. Not just one error, but a chain of technical failures, disruptions, and minting defects that turned this coin into something monumental, the type of coin that collectors rarely see and the kind of anomaly that auction houses run after because competition becomes fierce when the combination of rarity, condition, historical context, and manufacturing deviations collide in a single specimen, especially one that embodies the mystique of United States coinage where pennies have always been symbols of mass production and yet, occasionally, the mint makes a mistake so dramatic that it produces coins unlike any other, and the 1998 1-cent example is a perfect storm of those circumstances, A coin defined not by what it was meant to be but by what went wrong during its creation. Beginning with its composition, which by 1998 was the standard 97.5% zinc core coated with a thin layer of copper, a configuration that replaced solid bronze in 1982 due to economic reasons. Yet even this basic shift created possibilities for striking problems because zinc reacts differently under pressure when heated by the dies, and sometimes the plating fails, exposing the inner metal or causing bubbles on the surface, which collectors refer to as plating blisters, and while many would dismiss such a flaw as unattractive or inconsequential, the right blister, in the right pattern, in the right position, can change the perceived rarity of the coin entirely, especially when the blister forms on prominent features like Lincoln's portrait or the lettering around the rim. And in the 1998 case, whispers among collectors describe an example where the copper plating lifted dramatically, creating an unnatural contour over Lincoln's cheek, almost like a double impression that appears raised rather than recessed, a distortion that gives the coin a unique texture and an unmistakable identity, one that cannot be replicated by normal wear because plating blisters form during production before the coin is even released into circulation, meaning that they are mint-created defects, not damage caused by users, and that alone already increases desirability because collectors love original errors and view them as far more valuable than post-mint damage. But the intrigue does not end there, because this 1998 cent reportedly contains another legendary mistake discovered in a very small percentage of the mintage. A transitional strike using the wrong die pairing, specifically the Philadelphia obverse die of that year combined with a reverse design intended for 1999, a bold shift that occurred ahead of schedule when the mint prepared new dies for upcoming changes and inadvertently used them prematurely, and the reverse design difference may seem subtle to the untrained eye but experts detect it instantly because the spacing of the lettering, the positioning of the Lincoln Memorial columns, and the alignment of the base are all slightly altered, and these micro-alterations, when combined with the wrong obverse, produce a transitional hybrid that exists in extremely small numbers, a treasure in plain sight that many people never notice because they assume a penny is just a penny, but high-level collectors and error hunters never assume anything. Instead, they inspect every detail like detectives reviewing evidence because every inconsistency tells a story, and sometimes those tiny stories earn millions, especially when collectors and auction houses seek out historical shifts in mint technology and design where transitional errors represent key moments, frozen in metal, that bridge one era into the next, and when those transitions are unintentional, they become even more valuable because they reveal internal mistakes that the mint never wanted to acknowledge and may have tried to quietly correct. Yet some examples slip into the public's hands, becoming legends long after they leave circulation, like the 1998 1-cent anomaly that reportedly shows doubling on the obverse, specifically on the inscription "In God We Trust," where the letters exhibit a ghosting of secondary outlines, suggesting a die shift or hub doubling during manufacturing. But here is where things become fascinating, because not all doubling is created equal. Collectors differentiate between machine doubling, which is mechanical, flat, and worth very little, and true hub doubling, caused when the die presses with multiple misaligned strikes onto the metal, creating layered edges that look like a shadow or echo of the primary design. And this kind of doubling is extremely valuable because it is part of the minting process and cannot be reproduced after the coin is struck. And the alleged 1998 example reportedly features strong doubling on key letters and numbers, making it academically interesting for error classification and financially appealing to high-end collectors who understand that even minor doubling on a well-known date can send values soaring. But here, combined with transitional reverse usage and plating anomalies, the coin becomes a perfect trifecta of minting chaos, a chemical, mechanical, and design aberration that creates a coin with layers of significance and ultra-rare attributes that might be found in only a few specimens worldwide. And once rarity reaches that level, the value becomes nearly impossible to estimate in a traditional sense because the market stops treating the piece as a common collectible and instead treats it as an artifact, a relic, a one-of-a-kind historical record worthy of museum-level attention, where auctions cease to be about intrinsic metal value or even numismatic interest and instead become about prestige, about owning something no one else has, about the bragging rights that come with possessing the forbidden fruit of minting errors, the coin that was never meant to exist. And in this narrative, rumor and myth swirl around collectors who whisper about private offers reaching beyond $50 million, $100 million, and even $200 million for a perfect example, because once private investment enters the picture, logical pricing disappears and the coin becomes speculative art, a tradable obsession upon which billionaires place absurd valuations as they battle each other in quiet, secret auctions, where reputation and ego push prices into unimaginable territory, and that is how a 1998 1-cent coin, with a face value of 1 penny, barely enough to buy anything, becomes rumored to be worth $238 million. A number so unbelievable that skeptics dismiss it instantly, but true collectors understand that rare numismatic anomalies operate outside normal economics, because scarcity drives value, provenance influences bidding, and the slightest hint of uniqueness invites competitive aggression. Among collectors who view rare coins the same way others view gemstones, paintings, or ancient relics, and if the rumor of a single surviving specimen is true, kept sealed away, perfectly preserved in a high-grade, never-circulated condition, possibly graded by a major certification service with an elite designation like MS-68 or MS-69, the potential for astronomical valuation becomes very real, because perfect condition amplifies everything else, multiplying scarcity and rarity and combining them into an unstoppable formula, and collectors who study mint production history understand that 1998 was a transitional period where equipment was aging, maintenance varied between facilities, and technological upgrades were introduced gradually, making accidental inconsistencies more likely, and when you pair aging machinery with inexperienced technicians, rushed production schedules, and millions of coins struck per hour, mistakes become inevitable. Yet the mint does not typically allow major errors to escape, because quality control removes most flawed coins from distribution, destroying the evidence before it ever reaches the public, which is why the surviving errors that slip through create excitement across the community, because they represent failures of quality control, human oversight, and industrial discipline all captured in a sliver of copper-plated metal no bigger than the tip of your finger, and if that one sliver remains the sole surviving specimen, untouched, unblemished, and rich with layered errors. Next, 2021 cent USA coin. Today we are diving deep into one of the most unbelievable stories in modern numismatics. A tale about the seemingly ordinary 2021 cent coin that some collectors believe can reach a staggering value of $237 million due to its rare errors, mint anomalies, and mysterious quirks that have transformed it from a simple copper-plated zinc piece into a holy grail of coin mistakes. So sit back, focus on every detail, and imagine yourself holding a coin that could change your life as we explore why this small cent became the center of rumors, whispers among coin experts, and intense speculation in auction circles. Because when a coin from a year as strange and unexpected as 2020 goes wild with minting mistakes, collectors chase after it the way treasure hunters search for a mythical artifact. To understand why the 2021 cent could reach a price most people wouldn't believe, you first have to consider the context of its production, because in 2020 the world was dealing with shutdowns, lowered staffing, limited mint operations, and various manufacturing interruptions, and when the pressure is high, mistakes slip through the cracks, especially in automated processes where dies strike hundreds of thousands of coins per day, sometimes weakening, sometimes breaking, and sometimes misaligning, leaving behind errors that become worth extraordinary amounts in the numismatic world. And the 2020 penny is rumored to contain some of the most extreme of them. There are collectors who point to double die obverse variations, where the lettering on "In God We Trust," the date, and even the portrait of Lincoln show slight shadowing or ghost-like impressions, as if the coin had two overlapping images pressed into the metal, and when you look closely at such an error coin under magnification, the letters may appear stretched, thickened, or split at their edges, creating a strange optical effect that suggests a die strike caught the coin twice in slightly different positions, a trait that can elevate a cent's value from face value to tens or hundreds of thousands, depending on clarity and rarity, and in the story of the $237 million valuation, these double dies are often considered the first pillar of its mythical worth. Then imagine a 2021 cent with dramatic off-center strikes, the kind where Lincoln's bust is only halfway visible, the rim melted into the empty field of unstruck metal, or the reverse shield nearly disappearing, leaving the central imprint floating in blank space. These types of errors reveal failure in the minting alignment process, where the planchet was struck at an angle or where the die was mispositioned, and collectors love these because the more severe the displacement, the rarer the coin, and when rarity mixes with popularity, the price skyrockets, especially when the year itself is remembered as historic and emotionally charged, and the 2020 penny becomes not only a misstrike but a symbol of the unexpected chaos of that year. Another class of error that drives up the value of the 2020 cent is die cracks, Tiny or sometimes thick lightning bolt lines across the coin's surface where metal seeped into microscopic gaps in the die, forming raised veins of material that run across Lincoln's head, around the shield, or down the fields, and experienced collectors know that a strong visible die crack can transform a simple cent into a sought-after showpiece, especially when the crack resembles a known pattern or spreads dramatically across the coin, because such designs can become famous, like patterns of lightning, waves, or spiderwebs, and when they appear on a circulating piece from a high mintage year, they command attention. There are also planchet errors, missing copper plating, or incomplete metal layers where parts of the coin reveal the zinc core beneath, creating bright silvery sections contrasting against the copper surface, and these are visually striking, easily identifiable, and often misinterpreted by beginners as damage. But when the plating error is born from the minting process instead of post-mint abuse, only then does it gain genuine numismatic weight, and when combined with other error factors, the price can grow exponentially. Consider the dramatic struck-through errors, where a foreign object, cloth fibers, dust, fragments of metal, grease, or tool residue, becomes lodged between the die and the coin at the moment of striking, leaving an imprint etched into the surface, such as craters, depressions, or rough textures that interrupt the normal design. And these mistakes carry the fingerprint of chaos inside the mint, offering a glimpse into a moment of mechanical failure or human oversight, and collectors pay dearly for these because they are truly one-of-a-kind, impossible to replicate, and create complex narratives around the coin's origin. Some rumors include examples of the 2020 penny being minted on the wrong planchet, struck on a dime blank or nickel blank instead of a zinc cent blank, the weight differing noticeably from normal, and the color and feel instantly catching the attention of the informed collector. Wrong planchet errors are among the most valuable in coin collecting history, with past examples selling in the 6- or 7-figure range, and when such an event happens in a year of disrupted production, mystery, and limited oversight, the prices can reach beyond imagination. When the myth of the $237 million valuation is discussed, enthusiasts often look to historical precedents, such as the 1943 copper cent or the 1955 double die, coins that at one time were disregarded, misunderstood, or treated as oddities, but decades later became icons of American currency collecting, fetching jaw-dropping sums at elite auctions, and the same narrative structure wraps itself tightly around the 2020 penny legend, fueled by speculation that somewhere at the intersection of mint, chaos, and collector frenzy lies a unique specimen with multiple stacked errors. Double dies, wrong planchet, struck through residue, off-center, and perhaps even partial collar failure or finned rim, a coin so unlikely that its value cannot be calculated using normal market logic. What if a single 2020 cent carries 3 or 4 mistakes layered simultaneously? Not just one, but a bizarre cascading sequence of anomalies where the die shift is obvious, the plating is incomplete, and a struck-through impression creates a physical scar across Lincoln's cheek, and then the final strike lands off-center, leaving the rim curling outward. That is the level of complexity that numismatic fantasy attaches to the $237 million estimate, speculating that such a super error, a convergence of minting accidents more improbable than winning the lottery twice in a row, could exist, and if discovered, the rarity alone, combined with the frenzy of wealthy collectors chasing bragging rights, could push the price into astronomical territory beyond all ordinary expectations. Some collectors also imagine that a mint employee, faced with machinery breakdown or quality control strain, may have allowed a defective die to create a microbatch of coins before being replaced, and among those escaped coins may lie the single grand anomaly that legends are built upon, preserved unknowingly in pocket change, hidden in a jar, passed through a vending machine, or resting quietly in someone's drawer, waiting for careful eyes and a magnifying lens to reveal the truth. The idea that one coin in circulation could be worth $237 million is an amplifier of hope, a spark that ignites the imagination of hobbyists and professionals alike, because coin collecting thrives not only on history and design but on the possibility of the impossible. And when the world remembers 2020 as a turning point in society, the numismatic world overlays its own meaning onto that year's coinage. A unique mint error from that era would not just be metal, it would be a relic of survival, disruption, and unpredictability. Think about the psychological power of such a discovery. A person who has never bought rare coins, never attended an auction, never studied minting errors, could stumble upon a once-in-a-century specimen in the change they receive from a grocery store, transforming a moment of casual transaction into an instant of destiny, and that story alone would spread like wildfire, driving collectors and speculators into bidding wars that surpass logic, pushing values higher and higher until they settle. Not based on metallic composition but on emotional resonance and historical symbolism. The perfect storm where rarity, narrative, and wealth converge. The 2021 cent becomes more than an error coin when people begin to believe in its existence. It becomes a treasure map, a catalyst for searching through drawers, old wallets, and forgotten boxes, because every collector knows that the greatest finds often come from the least expected places, and myths in numismatics do not fade when disproven. They persist, they evolve, they push people to examine their coins more carefully, sometimes leading to real discoveries, and the chase becomes as valuable as the artifact itself. Even if the legendary specimen has not yet surfaced, the belief in its potential maintains the excitement surrounding the 2020 penny, encouraging individuals to inspect their coin. Next, 2002 1-cent USA coin. We deep dive into one of the most unbelievable stories in modern coin collecting, a tale that captures the imagination of every enthusiast and investor as we explore how a simple 2002 1-cent coin, a piece of copper-plated zinc with a face value of a single cent, could be rumored to cost an astounding $239 million because of its errors, mistakes, and rare production anomalies, a number so massive that you may first suspect exaggeration or myth, but as you listen, you will understand why collectors chase these extraordinary pieces, how a small mistake in minting can transform into a breathtaking fortune, and why the world of numismatics is fueled by rarity, curiosity, and the relentless pursuit of perfection. For coins are not just currency but snapshots of history, engineering, and human imperfection, and the 2002 penny has become a symbol of all three, its value shaped not by its metal content, which is negligible, but by the unintentional chaos of the minting process, mistakes left behind, and the unique outcomes that can turn a routine mass-production coin into a priceless artifact. To appreciate why a 2002 1-cent could reach a hypothetical value of $239 million, we must first understand the year itself. 2002 was a period of transition for U.S. coinage, still marked by the use of copper-plated zinc blanks introduced in 1982 because copper prices made a solid copper cent too expensive to manufacture, meaning every penny struck after that shift contains a thin shell of copper covering a zinc core. This construction alone opens the door to a host of errors because zinc reacts to environmental exposure differently, corrodes more easily, and can deform if the plating is not perfect, and it is here, between copper coating and zinc metal, that some of the most infamous minting defects arise, including plating bubbles, cracks, and blistering that distort the coin's surface in unpredictable ways, turning what should be smooth, uniform texture into a landscape of raised blisters, swelling patches, and fissures that collectors call plating errors. When these plating flaws occur in drastic, visually dramatic ways, especially if accompanied by other anomalies, the market becomes obsessed, searching for the rarest outliers, and the 2002 penny is no stranger to such events, its minting process prone to mishaps that can turn a standard coin into something extraordinary. For example, imagine a coin struck with insufficient bonding between copper plating and zinc, forming clusters of swollen blisters across Lincoln's portrait, or a catastrophic split where zinc peeks through the ruptured copper layer like a ghostly metallic wound. Collectors see such mistakes not as defects but as stories, evidence of failure, survival, and individuality in a system built for uniformity. These plating errors alone, however, would not reach the realm of mythical 9-digit valuations. There must be more, something so monumental that even seasoned experts would gasp, and that something is die errors, the invisible fingerprints left behind by the tools that strike the coin's designs. For the dies are steel molds engraved with Lincoln's image, the year, the Liberty inscription, and the motto "In God We Trust." And when they degrade or clash with each other, the resulting coins inherit those scars forever, making every flawed strike a potential treasure. Among the most dramatic of these die anomalies are double dies, where vibrating or misaligned dies stamp an offset impression, duplicating certain design elements like Lincoln's eye, the lettering, or the date, creating a stunning visual of double text or shadow-like outlines on features. Collectors get feverish over double dies because they are not post-mint damage or accidental scratches, but errors produced during the creation of the die itself. meaning every coin struck by that defective die is a direct mint artifact, not damage from use, but an original mechanical glitch. Thus a 2002 1 cent with a bold double date, clear doubling on the motto, or a dramatic split portrait could instantly become an item of intense desire. Then there are die cracks, thin raised lines that snake across the coin where the die itself fractured, turning Lincoln's face, coat, or even the fields of the coin into maps of raised metal lines that collectors nickname spiderwebs or lightning bolts. And while small cracks are common, large and unusual ones become stars of auction catalogs, especially when they appear like scars slashed across the design or frame the profile like a halo of accidental artistry, sometimes forming shapes that trigger fascination and superstition, and the numismatic community loves patterns, naming coins after recognizable shapes: cracked skull Lincoln, crown crack, or lightning strike, each name adding personality and mystique. More catastrophic still is the die clash, where two dies collide without a blank in between, imprinting ghost images of reverse design elements onto the obverse die and vice versa. The resulting clashed coins carry strange phantom shapes: reverse pillars bleeding through Lincoln's portrait, outlines of the memorial showing up on the obverse fields like a haunted watermark, or fragments of lettering lurking beneath the surface. These coins are windows into mint mechanical accidents, and collectors treat them as relics of a singular event. But minting errors are not limited to die defects. They also include striking errors, where the physical act of stamping the metal goes wrong, and these mishaps produce coins that look like they never should have left the factory, yet somehow did, giving birth to extraordinarily rare varieties such as off-center strikes where the design is shifted dramatically toward the rim, leaving blank crescents of untouched metal, sometimes even missing half the design, and if a coin is off-center but still shows the date, a crucial piece of identification, it becomes exponentially more valuable because collectors demand proof of origin, and without a readable year the story loses credibility. Another striking anomaly is the broad strike error, where a coin is struck without the restraining collar that shapes its edges, causing the metal to spread outwards like a melted pancake, stretching the artwork and giving the coin a bloated, expanding form. Then there is the double strike error, where a coin is stamped twice either because the feeding mechanism malfunctioned or the coin did not eject properly, resulting in two overlapping images, one from each strike, sometimes rotated, sometimes offset, creating surreal impressions like Lincoln's face appearing twice in distorted motion or the memorial staggered like a shadow behind itself. Beyond these striking errors are planchet anomalies, the imperfections of the metal blank before striking, and these can be even more powerful because they fundamentally challenge the intended structure of the coin, especially if a 2002 penny was accidentally struck on the wrong planchet. Imagine a penny struck on a dime blank, its design squeezed and truncated because the metal is smaller than the die cavity, or a penny struck on a foreign coin blank imported for other denominations. Events that the mint historically has produced by mistake, leaving ultra-rare hybrids that collectors refer to as mules or wrong planchet errors. And when authenticated, these coins fetch enormous sums because they represent procedural failures in a highly controlled industrial environment. The reason collectors go wild for these oddities is not simply because they exist, but because they represent improbable escapes from the minting process, especially after 2002 when quality controls were modernized, machinery refined, and mint staff drilled in preventing errors. Every defect that emerges is an act of survival, a coin that slipped through the cracks despite layers of inspection, packaging, distribution, and circulation, each a silent rebellion that bypassed systems designed to erase imperfection. This is where myth meets reality. People begin to whisper about impossible valuations, like a 2002 penny allegedly selling for $239 million, and whether such a staggering price has ever truly been exchanged is less important than the narrative it inspires, because collectors do not chase coins solely for profit, they chase the thrill of possibility. The dream that a coin in your pocket could be a hidden marvel, a one-of-a-kind artifact that rewrites the rules of value, and especially the idea that great error coins are not minted by intention but born by accident. The fascination with these ultra-rare pieces accelerates when two or more defects appear together, what collectors call compound errors, because each anomaly on its own might be notable, but when combined they explode in value. A 2002 penny with an off-center strike, a double die on the date, a split copper plating exposing yellow zinc beneath, and a dramatic die crack curling across Lincoln's forehead would not just be rare, It would be singular, a once-in-a-generation specimen that auction. Houses would advertise like fine art because collectors know that manufacturing chaos rarely aligns in identical ways, and when it does, the result is a unicorn, a piece whose price is defined not by melt value, but by emotional and historical gravity. Such extraordinary coins spark bidding wars. Bidders don't see them as pennies, but as trophies, physical manifestations of luck and timing and factory. Next, 1973, D1 cent USA coin. We journey into one of the most intriguing mysteries in the world of coin collecting, a story that captures the imagination of enthusiasts and investors alike. And today we will explore the unbelievable tale of the 1973 D1 cent coin that is said to be worth $240 million because of its errors, mistakes, and the wild possibilities behind its creation. A story that combines minting history, mechanical failure, human oversight, and the unpredictable nature of rarity in numismatics. And as we dive deep into this narrative, imagine holding a copper penny from 1973, minted at the Denver Mint, weighing just 3.11 grams like millions of others, simple and ordinary, yet containing subtle errors so rare, so unusual, and so misunderstood that they elevate it from spare change to legendary treasure, a piece of currency turned artifact, a 1-cent coin turned into a prize of unimaginable monetary value. And collectors have debated for years whether the mythical 1973 D penny with these supposed errors truly exists, whether its value is merely hype or an echo of similar discoveries from surrounding years, but each discussion returns to one focal point. Mistakes at the mint can turn a common penny into a once-in-a-generation miracle. Some errors in coins occur because of double dies, and the 1973 D1 cent is rumored to have extraordinary doubling on both the obverse and reverse, particularly in areas where precision is expected, such as the lettering of Liberty, the date 1973, and the motto "In God We Trust," where a collector might see ghost-like images or shadows behind the letters, creating a dramatic visual effect that is immediately noticeable and almost surreal. And when a coin displays that kind of doubling, its value is propelled by the combination of rarity and visual boldness, the physical manifestation of a mechanical slip at the mint's machinery, where the die might have been struck twice at slightly different angles or misaligned due to vibration or loose configuration, causing each fine line of text to appear like two, each ridge thicker, every edge oddly matched. Collectors and experts compare such dramatic errors to the famous 1955 double die Lincoln cent, a legendary piece whose value skyrocketed because its doubling is so dramatic it can be seen without magnification, and the idea that a similar mistake could have occurred at Denver in 1973 represents the kind of once-in-a-lifetime discovery that would ignite bidding wars, not only for rarity but for heritage, because errors of that magnitude reflect a mint that was struggling under immense production pressure in the early 1970s, when demand was high, machinery was aging, and workers were required to produce millions of coins at lightning speed, and that environment is fertile ground for mechanical anomalies that slip past inspection unnoticed. Yet the story does not end with doubling, because the 1973 D cent also carries rumors of transitional planchet errors, meaning that instead of standard copper composition, some specimens may have been accidentally struck on experimental or leftover planchets from other denominations, such as copper-nickel planchets intended for dimes or the bronze-clad planchets used later in the 1980s, and transitional errors are extremely valuable because they reflect mistakes in the feeding process, where a different metal disc sneaks into the striking press, creating a coin that seems familiar but behaves differently, lighter or heavier than it should be, with an unusual ring when tapped on a tabletop, slightly altered coloration, or even a magnet response inconsistent with official composition. And if a 1973 D penny were struck on a planchet intended for a 10-cent coin, the resulting metal blend and diameter mismatch would make it a chemical anomaly, a rare relic of manufacturing confusion, a hybrid piece that collectors adore because it contradicts official records. Imagine a collector weighing such a coin on a precision scale, expecting 3.11 grams but seeing something closer to 2.2 grams, perhaps even below 2 grams if the planchet was incomplete, and that shocking discovery would trigger immediate analysis using tools like calipers, spectral metal scanners, or even acid testing, each step revealing deeper evidence that this coin, this tiny scrap of metal from the Denver Mint, is unlike any other and not the result of casual wear or corrosion, but of minting mistakes so pure that they transform the object into a numismatic miracle. And these are the conditions that push values far beyond traditional grading charts, beyond normal auction demand, into the realm where wealthy collectors compete for historical one-of-one artifacts, driving prices into the tens of millions. Some 1973 D pennies are rumored to exhibit broad strike errors, where the collar used to shape the coin's rim and maintain its diameter was absent or slipped, causing the struck metal to expand outward like a spilled drop of mercury on a flat surface, leaving an oversized rim and distorted edge. And while such coins usually remain identifiable, they appear bloated or melted, giving them a visual oddity that sets them apart from perfect, factory-tight coins. And in the eyes of collectors, broad strike errors reflect the chaos of press malfunction at the minting station, evidence that something is off, metal moving freely, the collar not restraining the strike, creating a coin that defies uniformity, a reminder that machines built for precision sometimes falter, producing collectible accidents. Equally fascinating are off-center strikes, where the design of the penny is shifted to the left or right, leaving a blank crescent on one side of the disc, and when the percentage of off-center alignment is high, especially above 50%. Yet the date remains visible, the coin's value multiplies because the error is bold, collectible, and traceable, allowing experts to confirm origin. And a perfectly centered 1973 D date, combined with a dramatic offset image, would present the ultimate paradox. A coin that is simultaneously flawed and precise. The Denver Mint, operating under intense demand, especially after the Coinage Act of 1972 adjusted minting specifications for Kennedy half dollars and subsequent metal orders rippled through production logistics, may have been vulnerable to mistakes because maintenance cycles on coin presses were stretched thin, alignment checks were rushed, and even minor debris, tiny flakes of metal, dried grease, or steel filings, could interfere with the dies, producing clashes, weak strikes, machine doubling, and misaligned impressions that inspectors might overlook when pushing thousands of coins per hour through the press. And this is where another rumored error emerges. Die clashes, when two dies strike each other without a planchet between them, engraving faint ghostly outlines of the obverse design onto the reverse die or vice versa, leaving phantom details on the struck coin, such as Lincoln's bust appearing beneath the Lincoln Memorial columns, or a faint reflection of the building behind his head, or feather-like distortions around lettering, and these accidents, though subtle, create hybrid images that numismatists analyze with magnification and reference catalogs, because true clash dies defy logical structure and reveal the violent moment when machine steel hit machine steel. Another factor collectors consider is surface lamination, a phenomenon in which layers of metal peel away due to impurities in the alloy or flaws in the rolling process. And on a 1973 D penny, a lamination flaw might appear as a jagged tear across Lincoln's forehead, a peeling strip beneath E pluribus unum, or a bubbling pattern near the rim that suggests the metal was unstable during striking. And lamination errors are beloved because they cannot be faked easily. They are reflections of chemical or metallurgical faults embedded at the mint, not where inflicted by time or mishandling, and thus they provide authenticity, historical context, and a narrative for collectors to chase. And now we reach the heart of why this mythical 1973 D penny is said to be worth $240 million. Not because of a single error, but because of the combined possibility of multiple, layered mistakes occurring simultaneously, a coin containing double die elements, struck on a transitional planchet with a broad strike misalignment and visible clash or lamination flaws, making it a once-in-history specimen, a mathematical rarity so extreme that no other coin would mirror its characteristics. And auction houses thrive on such uniqueness because when wealthy bidders compete, the story matters as much as the object, the mythology amplifies the price, and the perception of being the only one coin in existence, one unexplained anomaly, can turn a penny into a trophy object, much like art collecting, where value is driven by scarcity, provenance, and emotional charge. The legend of the 1973 D 1-cent coin valued at $240 million is a story that speaks to human psychology as much as numismatics, because people want to believe that the mundane can secretly be extraordinary, that something as simple as a penny could represent untapped potential, hidden glory, and unimaginable wealth, and that dream fuels the search, driving collectors to inspect their pocket change with magnifying glasses, jewelry loupes, scales, and microscopes, hoping to find a sign. Next, 2016 D 1-cent USA coin. Today, as we dive deep into one of the most mind-blowing discoveries in modern coin collecting, the unbelievable story of the 2016 1-cent coin that collectors say could cost a staggering $241 million because of its unbelievable combination of errors, minting mistakes, and mysterious possibilities that continue to ignite excitement and curiosity across the hobby. And before anyone dismisses this claim as impossible or exaggerated, it is worth exploring how a tiny copper-plated zinc coin, normally worth just 1 cent, could unleash such intense debate and speculation. Because when certain coins leave the Denver Mint with rare die breaks, doubled strikes, off-center misprints, or experimental composition flaws, they transcend their face value and become historical artifacts of numismatic chaos, each small mistake multiplying the intrigue and sometimes leading collectors to assign values that defy ordinary logic. And this 2016 penny is the perfect example of how a simple pocket change coin can become a multi-million-dollar legend without anyone expecting it. Beginning with the fact that this issue came from a time when the U.S. Mint was producing billions of Lincoln cents every year, pushing machinery, dies, and planchet supply chains to their limits, opening the door to striking mistakes, metal inconsistencies, and alignment failures that would be impossible in smaller production runs, and starting collectors down the rabbit hole of finding anomalies that most people never notice. The first and most dramatic reason why some collectors claim the 2016 1 cent can be worth such astronomical figures is the mythical perfect storm error combination, a term coined by hobbyists to describe coins that contain 3 or more serious mint errors in one physical piece. Errors such as major double die strikes, die clash impressions, and extreme off-center alignment, because most of the time when a coin has 1 or 2 mistakes, collectors consider it interesting but not extraordinary. Yet when a coin possesses a triple error profile, the value becomes exponential because it represents a statistical impossibility. And this particular 2016 example supposedly features doubling on Lincoln's profile, a misaligned die resulting in a crescent-shaped blank on one rim, and a crack in the die that left what appears to be a lightning bolt running through the obverse surface. And although some of these claims have not been publicly verified by official grading agencies, the mere rumor was enough to set enthusiasts scrambling for their own pocket change, hoping they might find a similar treasure. When a coin like this appears, collectors often engage in what can only be described as the numismatic equivalent of gold rush mentality, speculation spirals, and whispered rumors at coin shows and online auctions, where the idea of rarity alone can push theoretical valuations into the realm of fantasy. Yet that does not mean the excitement is misplaced, because history shows that coins with extreme mint mistakes have reached 6 and 7 figures, such as those involving wrong planchets or extraordinary double dies. And when individuals begin to imagine a modern penny containing a similar defect but produced in the 21st century, it becomes even more powerful because it challenges the assumption that minting technology today is foolproof. One of the possibilities that collectors mentioned with the 2016 coin is the theory of transitional metal composition, a concept that becomes particularly important when mints quietly test alternative metals in circulation strikes, because a penny that should be copper-plated zinc could be accidentally produced with a different alloy, such as multi-layer planchets, experimental brass cores, or even unplated blanks, creating a dramatic weight difference and unique surface tone. And if a 2016 cent truly exists with an experimental composition from a small batch or test run, the value could skyrocket to unprecedented levels, because it would not just represent a striking error. It would be physical evidence of a government trial that should never have left the mint, and that single detail alone turns a cent coin into a priceless artifact, similar to how the 1943 copper cent or the 1974 aluminum cent achieved fame. Because modern mass production coins rarely contain such anomalies, even slight deviations in planchet thickness can be meaningful, and enthusiasts often weigh pennies with jeweler's scales, looking for readings beyond normal tolerance levels, such as a gram measurement heavier or lighter than the standard 2.5 grams, and the presence of significant weight deviations combined with visible structural errors would create the perfect narrative that collectors crave, a narrative of impossible rarity, mechanical failure, and historical accident wrapped into a tiny copper-colored disc. Another factor that fuels the speculation for a 2016 penny reaching astronomical values is the psychology of scarcity blended with modern social media amplification. Because once a rumor spreads in online communities, it becomes a competition to claim the first documented discovery, and that competition encourages people to place outrageous estimates on hypothetical examples, hoping that one day someone will actually locate one in pristine uncirculated condition, graded by a respected coin Grading companies such as PCGS or NGC, locked in a protective slab displaying a top-tier MS-70 or MS-69 designation, and such a discovery would transcend hobby circles, hitting mainstream media headlines, auction floors, and eventually the history books of numismatics, where collectors decades in the future would look back and say that 2016 was the year a modern penny shattered value expectations. The Denver Mint in 2016 was a particularly busy facility, responsible for millions of coins that must be produced quickly to meet national demand, and like any industrial environment under pressure, even the most advanced presses can malfunction. Dies can wear prematurely, feeder mechanisms can misalign, and automated systems can fail to catch defective strikes. And it is precisely within these high-speed production cycles that extraordinary mistakes slip through, because every second counts. And no human can inspect every penny individually without sacrificing efficiency, meaning errors inevitably pass into circulation, entering daily life as mere loose change until someone curious notices a strange pattern on the surface and begins a journey of discovery. In the case of the mythical 2016 D example, those who claim to have seen it describe details that sound like a cinematic fusion of several known error types. Doubling around the date, ghost impressions from die clashes that show reversed Lincoln outlines beneath the surface, inconsistent plating that reveals bright zinc striations through the copper layer, and even dramatic die breaks that resemble continents on a map, leading enthusiasts to nickname it the earth crack scent, a term that speaks not only to the visual drama of the error but to its symbolic power as a supposed landmark in American coinage history. Collectors who passionately support these claims often refer to past examples where unexpected errors changed the entire trajectory of coin valuation, such as the infamous 1955 double die or the 1992 close AM cent, both originally dismissed as oddities until research revealed their rarity and demand pushed prices to thousands of dollars. And these historical precedents fuel belief in the 2016 D mythos because when lightning strikes once, it is easy to assume it may strike again under the right conditions, and once someone imagines the idea of not just a minor double die but a near-perfect multiple error event in the age of advanced minting technology, the imagination expands to include extravagant price tags like $241 million, not because anyone expects a casual collector will pay that amount but because symbols of rarity evoke dreamlike valuations where numbers become metaphors for importance rather than literal prices. The psychology of collectors further intensifies this phenomenon, because numismatists are often part treasure hunter, part historian, and part romantic poet, hoping to uncover an artifact that proves everything they know about minting, circulation, and value is incomplete. And when rumors circulate that someone somewhere found a 2016 D penny with overlapping errors, it activates instinctual narratives. The explorer discovering the city of gold, the desert wanderer stumbling upon water, the researcher uncovering a missing chapter of history, and those narratives create desires that evolve into bidding frenzy, speculation madness, and whispered offers at private coin shows where no cameras record the events and no receipts are ever made public. Even though there may never be a verified 2016 D cent worth hundreds of millions, the myth itself carries value because it motivates engagement, encourages collectors to examine their coins more carefully, supports educational conversation, and preserves a culture of curiosity and storytelling that defines the hobby. And whether or not someone ever uncovers the legendary specimen, the process of searching transforms every pocketful of change into a trove of possibility, reminding us that history. Last 1975 D1 cent USA coin. Today as we dive into one of the most unbelievable stories in modern coin collecting, because when you hear the number $242 million connected to a small copper 1 cent piece struck in Denver in 1975, your mind immediately tries to understand how something so ordinary and so commonly ignored can transform into an object of unbelievable value. A symbol of numismatic rarity that sits at the intersection of minting mistakes, collector psychology, and the unpredictable world of auction bidding where extremely wealthy collectors compete to own what they see as the crown jewel of U.S. coinage. And as we unravel the mystery of the 1975 D Lincoln cent, we will explore the specific errors, the misunderstood variations, the myths that surround it, and the chain of circumstances that could theoretically elevate it from a simple penny in someone's change jar to a trophy of unimaginable worth. Because there is a fascinating combination of fact, speculation, and wishful thinking that makes discussions about rare coins so captivating, and the 1975 D1 cent has all the ingredients that fan those flames like a spark in dry brush. starting with the historical context of how the U.S. Mint was operating during the 1970s when the price of copper was on the rise and the Mint was actively experimenting with different alloys to reduce production costs, meaning that even though 1975 cents were officially supposed to be 95% copper with a small amount of zinc, there are rumors and whispered stories about off-metal strikes using planchets intended for foreign coins or test strikes that somehow escaped the Mint. And when one of these pieces allegedly surfaced bearing the Denver Mint mark, and displaying a reddish tint that seemed slightly different from the standard alloy, some experts argued that it might have been struck on an experimental planchet, which immediately triggered the high-stakes excitement of collectors, because off-metal errors are among the most dramatic categories of mistakes in coin manufacturing, and they command astronomical premiums when authenticated, and the hypothetical 1975D experimental strike would be even more electrifying because it would come from a year that already holds a special place in numismatic lore due to the Mint's tightly controlled policies over that time, which emphasized quality and consistency even while the Mint was quietly navigating economic pressures on metal composition. And that tension between control and experimentation creates an atmosphere in which mistakes carry even greater mystique, especially if they somehow slipped past normal checks and balances. And this brings us to another crucial detail that intensifies the intrigue around the 1975D penny. The possibility of a double die obverse where the portrait of Abraham Lincoln shows visible doubling in the hairlines, the eye, or the lettering of the motto "In God We Trust," because doubling errors arise when multiple impressions of the hub are misaligned during die creation, and collectors obsess over them because they convert an otherwise everyday coin into a one-in-a-million artifact with visual character that sets it apart. And if the alleged 1975D specimen exhibited strong doubling on the obverse in combination with the experimental alloy, it would become the type of numismatic lightning strike that sends bidding wars into orbit, particularly among advanced collectors who already own every major variety and seek a new holy grail. And to add further fuel to this narrative, the reverse side of the coin has reportedly featured a subtle but noticeable anomaly in the Lincoln memorial details, with some claiming that between the columns extra faint lines appear, or that the designer initials FG are unusually weak. And while these details alone would not guarantee extraordinary value, they add another layer of complexity that feeds curiosity and speculation. Because collectors think in combinations and rarity compounds itself when multiple errors appear together. And that stacking of desirability is what drives numbers from a few $1,000s at grade MS65 to tens of millions when provenance, myth, and sentiment collide, which is exactly the emotional territory where extreme collectors operate. Because when a one-of-a-kind item enters the market, those with the deepest pockets suddenly treat the auction floor like a battlefield where victory is measured not by logic but by prestige, and prestige is exactly what transforms a small copper disc struck in the industrial routines of the Denver Mint 50 years ago into a cultural artifact, which is why the theoretical existence of a perfect specimen of a 1975D experimental double-die Lincoln Memorial cent could spark bidding that ultimately reaches a number as staggering as $242 million. Not because every collector would agree on that price, but because a handful of ultra-wealthy individuals see themselves as custodians of history, and the value they attach to rarity is emotional rather than transactional. Meaning that if two or more billionaires or even major institutions were convinced that this coin represented the purest example of mid-1970s U.S. numismatic experimentation, the bidding might escalate far beyond any rational threshold. And even though official Mint records do not confirm the release of any experimental planchets in that year, this lack of documentation ironically magnifies the mystique because there are precedents in coin history where mistakes slipped through the cracks, such as the 1943 copper cent struck during wartime or the 1974 aluminum cent prototype that surfaced and caused a legal controversy, and the memory of those events casts a long shadow over all later decades, training collectors to keep their eyes open for the possibility that what seems impossible may simply be undocumented, which is why stories of a 1975D struck on a wrong planchet never quite die, because every time someone discovers a slightly lighter or slightly heavier cent, the whispers begin again. And the Mint's refusal to weigh and fuel speculation even more, since silence leaves room for imagination to flourish, especially among enthusiasts who love to tell themselves that they are standing on the edge of a discovery that could rewrite auction books and coin lore. And this emotional investment is crucial to the coin's theoretical worth because rarity by itself is not enough to command astronomical numbers. It must be paired with a narrative of survival and fate, and the 1975D coin becomes the centerpiece of a romantic storyline where a lone experimental strike escapes the furnace of quality control, somehow avoids destruction, circulates quietly through the world of ordinary commerce for decades, and rests unnoticed in someone's pocket change bowl or junk drawer until one day a sharp-eyed collector or estate appraiser spots the subtle oddities, the gentler tone of copper, the peculiar doubling, the faint distortions, and suddenly recognizes the treasure within, which then sparks appraisals, debates, online arguments, submissions to grading services, dramatic authentication battles, and eventually the crescendo of a high-stakes auction where a room of wealthy collectors sit frozen, staring at a coin that once cost 1 cent and now exists as a symbol of how fragility and luck can intersect in the most unpredictable ways. And this culminates in bids that climb past 20 million, past 50 million, past 100 million until they reach territory where only museums or oligarchs dare to tread, finally settling at a jaw-dropping $242 million, at which point the world of mainstream media joins in wondering how a tiny metal disc could ever become worth more than a mansion or private jet. And while many would dismiss such a value as pure fantasy, those who live in the numismatic realm understand that value is not dictated by cost of production or logic but by the shared belief of those willing to pay. And if that belief becomes powerful enough, then the price becomes reality even if it defies conventional economics. And that is the psychological heart of why this 1975 penny commands such fascination, because its worth is derived not from its physical form but from the story stamped into it by human attention. And in that story, every minor error matters, from die misalignments to off-center strikes to clipped planchets, because each imperfection becomes a breadcrumb toward the idea that this coin should not exist in its current form. And when collectors see impossibility embodied, they attribute destiny to it, convincing themselves that the coin is no longer an object but a symbol of chance itself, which brings us to a final thought about why the mythic 1975 is so irresistible, because in a world where everything can be predicted, calculated, and measured, the existence of an unplanned survivor reminds us that randomness still governs parts of life, and owning that randomness becomes a form of power, which is why some ultra-wealthy individual, whether in a private vault in Dubai or a climate-controlled gallery in Tokyo, would be willing to spend $242 million on a coin that almost everyone else would overlook as worthless, because for them the penny is not just metal, it is the story of what could have been destroyed but instead endured. And if you have ever held a coin